Hello there and welcome. In this video we are revisiting the macroalgae lagoon aquarium I did about 2 years ago actually. It's been running for 2 years, if not a little bit more, and this is how it has turned out. Now, if you have followed this series for the last 2 years, I've done a few videos, a few updates, but it's been a while since my last update. It's probably been about a year since we've last seen this tank. And well, it has come on a long way. It's very different to how you last saw it. You might appreciate that this is a flourishing aquarium. It's full of macroalgae. Since the last time I've done a video, it's absolutely gone mental. I've allowed it to grow a little bit wild. The fish choices have changed slightly. I'll explain why a little bit later. But I'll just show you around and show you what has happened in the last year. So in this tank, the idea was to have a lagoon type aquarium with lots of different types of macroalgae inside of it, and just to allow it to develop itself and to see what happens and see how the macroalgae grow. And I think in that regard I have been successful, because the macroalgae have grown, and I've learnt a lot about keeping macroalgae from this tank, because I think there is around 14 different types of macroalgae in this aquarium. Now, unless you know about macroalgae, you probably won't be able to distinguish the different types, but I'll run through them just quickly. We've got a few different types of Caulerpa. We've got Caulerpa lentilifera, so this is grape stuff. There is Caulerpa prolifera, which is this lovely grass-like stuff. At the back, amongst the Caulerpa lentilifera, there's also another blade-like Caulerpa, which is Caulerpa brachypus. And then growing at the back there is true Caulerpa racemosa. So there's 4 types of Caulerpa. We've got Halimeda, which is a calcareous algae growing there, and on top of that, which it tends to grow on lots of things actually, this is the ulva, which is basically sea lettuce. And then moving on to the more colourful algae, we've got Halictillon, which is this lovely red fern-like algae. And then at the top there, the blue stuff, we have got octodes. That's blue octodes. That's quite a rare algae to find, and it's only really blue from the surface. And then there's a few pest algae here which I've struggled to control really. This pink candy floss algae, although it's quite attractive, it is quite invasive, and you can see it grows over everything. There's a bit of cyano there just where the flow has died off, just purely because there's so much algae here. The flow's died off and there's a bit of cyano, but that doesn't actually appear anywhere else in the aquarium, so I've left it. Now, in my last video, the corals were quite a bit smaller. This wonderful luminous green cabbage coral has just gone mental. I think the last time I shot this coral was probably about 3 or 4 inches across, and now it is hand size, if not bigger. And then this toadstool has gone crazy. That was probably again about 4 inches across a year ago, and now it's got so big it's started to split and divide, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. Here I think is the real star of this aquarium. This is the Duressa clam that I put in there about a year ago, and it has got absolutely huge. I mean, it was the size of a 50p piece when I put it in there, which I guess is about an inch across, maybe an inch and a half. And now it is very big and absolutely beautiful, and it's thrived in this aquarium. I've tried to keep clams in other aquariums with mixed corals and things like that with not a lot of success, but in this tank it has done so well. And then we've got the coloured mushrooms that I've put in here, and they have also done wonderfully. When I put these mushrooms on this bit of rock, it was one ear of each colour. So we had one orange and one green, and as you can see, they love it in here. They've coloured up beautifully. I mean, they are bright orange and bright green. it's hard to show you really on the camera, but you can see the coloration of them. And this isn't under particularly bright blue light, this is just how they are when you look at the tank. And also there's some blue mushrooms in there. They look better over this side actually. There's some nice blue ones, Discosoma, and they are stunning. I mean, everything about this tank has just been so stable. I think it is one of the most successful aquariums I've ever done. And I put that down really to the algae, because in a lot of marine tanks that you see, what you tend to get is a stark wall of live rock with a mixed amount of corals all stuck together, but it's not, in my eyes, an ecosystem. And to get that balance, you have to use loads of different types of chemical. You've got reactors going, you've got all sorts of machinery underneath your tank doing the biological processes for you, removing the nitrate, removing the phosphate, and all the other bits and pieces which you struggle to maintain in a normal classic reef aquarium. But in this tank, I've had no issues whatsoever with nitrate. I've had no issues with phosphate. From pretty much day one, this has been the most stable aquarium I have ever kept. And to be honest, I'm having to put nitrates and phosphates into this tank to grow this algae. I'm having to dose iron fertilizer weekly just to keep this tank going. I mean, it's essentially a planted marine tank, but it is bringing me so much joy. And the fish, the animals within it, they are absolutely flourishing. I mean, we've got lovely wrasse in here. This is a dusky wrasse. You don't really see these very often because when they're in the shop, they're brown, and no one wants them because they are pretty much disgusting. But actually, in the right environment, they're beautiful fish. We've got a shoal of chromis, we've got a little yellow-tailed damsel, a mixed pair of clowns. There are some pipefish in here as well. There's a lovely jade wrasse. Again, one of these things that in the shops, they always look washed out, look horrible, no one wants them. But again, in this tank, it's bright green, looks beautiful, and there's a couple of cardinals as well floating around. Now, one thing I need to mention actually is something which I've forgotten to mention up until this point, and that's the mangrove. Now, I haven't shown you this yet, but if you remember, if you watched the previous video, the mangrove was a stick with 2 leaves on it, and now, well, it's no longer a stick with 2 leaves on it. It is a tree. We've got 4 branches, multiple leaves, and we're still growing. And I'm so pleased about it, because mangroves tend to be fairly hard to keep alive. I've actually had to put this Kessel light above it. That's its light source essentially, because it was growing off of this luminaire, but it's above the luminaire now, so it's on one of these plant Kessels. So if you want to grow a mangrove, the plant Kessels are the way to go really, because you can see the results. And one of the key tips to growing mangroves is actually to spray their leaves every day. They need that water on them. Basically, they build up salts on the leaf. That's how they get rid of a lot of the salt in them. And then the rain naturally washes it away. Well, in this case, the rain has to be you, and you need to spray it every day. If you do that, it will grow. But that's the one thing that people forget to do. So it looks lovely, and I think, in fact, this is the best tank I've ever done. I'm going to struggle to beat this one, but there has been some challenges in this journey. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been just a fact of putting macroalgae in the tank and forgetting about it. It takes a lot of management. Yes, it looks wild, but you do have to actually take a lot of care with this tank. It's very stable, like I said, because of all the algae that's in there. There are no nitrates, there's no phosphates. It's wonderfully stable, and I don't do water changes very often, probably once a month, and only about 20%. So actually it's beautiful. But my main struggle has been, in fact, the things in here are too happy. So in my previous video, the fish stocking was actually very different. There were many different types of fish in here that aren't in here now, and there's been some changes. And the reason for that is because I had a problem with one of the soft corals in here. Basically, it was a big finger coral. It was in the center here, you might remember, but it got so happy that it actually started to spawn, and it spawned one day, and basically I thought that was awesome. I was like, wow, my corals are spawning, how cool is that? And then the next day, because of all the eggs and things that were in there, it essentially caused an ammonia spike and pretty much wiped out all the fish that were in the fish tank. And that's one of the reasons why the fish have changed, because they all essentially died, and I had to replace them. I mean, survivors were these clownfish, but other than that, the jade wrasse survived, but other than that, everything else died. So I was left with a pair of clownfish and a jade wrasse. So other than those two things, everything had to be replaced. The pipefish, the other wrasse, there was another beautiful leopard wrasse in here, absolutely stunning, best one I've ever seen, but unfortunately we lost that too. But that's one of the things that happens, you know, when you make your corals too happy, they start to spawn, and in a closed environment that waste has got nowhere to go. Another thing that has happened is the algae have like become very happy, and they need quite a lot of management, in fact. So I'm always pulling handfuls of the Lentilifera out of here. I'm pulling a lot of Racemosa out of here. It's a wonderful macroalgae, but it grows really quickly. But that's part of the nutrient export in this tank, is basically this algae growing and me removing it, and that's taking the nitrates out and it's taking the phosphates out, and it's one of the things that keeps it so stable. The one problem I've got though is this particular rock here. It's a bit of a battleground for different algae. So I've got the octodes there, I've got the halictillum there, and that's the two algae that I actually want to grow on this rock. But unfortunately, other things like to grow through these algae. So this octode is constantly getting overgrown by the brachypus, so I'm constantly having to weed that, and it's actually due a weed. And on the halictillum, other than the end shoots which are growing, we're getting this ulva, and we're getting this pink candy floss algae, which is a real pain. And then on the top we've got cyno, but that's purely because the flow over the top is incredibly slow, because it's basically at the surface of the water. So that's one thing you do need to do with marine macroalgae tanks, is constantly be weeding it and taking algae out. It is a managed garden essentially. But if you can manage it, I think a planted marine tank is one of the best things that you could create. I have done other videos on macroalgae, so if you want to know how to grow them, how to care for them, then go through my playlist and you'll find out how to do this and how to recreate this in your living room. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's a real nice treat to be able to show you this tank, because it's been a long time coming and I'm very, very proud of it. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of this kind of content. Once again, thank you for watching and happy fish keeping.